On President Obama's last day in office, his national security advisor, Susan Rice, sent an email to herself about a meeting regarding Russian collusion in the 2016 election, which is a strange thing to do. But even stranger, she wrote about whether the Obama administration should withhold any information from the incoming Trump administration. Now, there are several strange aspects to this email. First of all, Susan Rice sent it to herself. That's odd. Second, it supposedly documents a meeting that happened 2 weeks prior to the email. Why would she send a summary of a meeting from 2 weeks ago as she's on her way out the door at the White House right before Trump's inauguration? Thirdly, she repeatedly stresses in her email how President Obama encouraged his intelligence agencies to investigate the allegations of Trump-Russia collusion by the book. Why would she repeatedly stress this? Why would Obama repeatedly stress this unless they weren't operating by the book? Unless, of course, Susan Rice sent that email so that she could use it later as proof that Obama supposedly wanted the investigation to be fair. Why would there be any discussion from an outgoing administration on what information to withhold from an incoming administration? That's number 4. Especially when the information related to something as serious as a national security risk, like a foreign nation like Russia meddling in our election. Is there information the Obama administration withheld from President Trump? And are there deep state agents in the Department of Justice and the intelligence community who are still following Obama's final orders instead of following the directions of their legal boss, President Trump? Joining me now, former chief counsel of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and founder of George Mason University's National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, thanks for coming on the show.
Liz, thanks for having me.
All right, let's start at the very beginning here. This email that Susan Rice sent to herself 2 weeks after the meeting, which she summarized in the email, took place. Is this a typical thing for her to do, to summarize that email, send it to herself 2 weeks later?
You know, not at all, Liz. I mean, this is very unusual. It's actually really disturbing. I mean, this is what the American people hate about government. You know, sort of these CYA emails sent after the fact, right at the end of the administration. In fact, probably after the administration was done, because she sent it at 12:15. The president was sworn in at 11:47. So, you know, 30 minutes after the president's sworn in, she's sending herself an email documenting for the record, you know, what had happened before. Very troubling and just odd.
Right, it is. And I think you're right. What most people are saying, at least most critics of this email are saying, is that this seems like something someone would do if they're trying to cover their own tracks. If there was something shady that happened, but they were trying to cover it up and they were trying to have this email, the information in this email be the information that was found instead of the truth here. You have experience in this area. You know what it's like to work in the intelligence community. When you look at this email, what are the red flags that you see?
Well, look, first she notes that the president ordered everybody to do things by the book. Well, I mean, obviously the president ordered do things by the book. Otherwise, why? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? If the president was doing something other than by the book, why would you feel the need to document this in writing? You know, and that's what's troubling to me. Sending it to yourself, you know, just so you have it for the record, so that when somebody looks back in the archives, they can say, oh, well, of course Susan Rice and President Obama did everything just right and by the book, because they put it in writing and they must have done it that way. It's just a very weird thing to do and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Even more troubling, Liz, as you pointed out earlier, is this idea that they might withhold information from the incoming administration. I mean, it boggles the mind that the national security advisor to the president is considering withholding information about a massive national security issue from the incoming administration. Look, you might think 1 or 2 people might have problems, whatever, but withholding it from the entire incoming team, that sounds ridiculous.
Well, it is ridiculous. I want to read this part of the email. The email's not too long, but I just want to read a portion of it. Susan Rice writes, the president stressed that he's not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as normally it would by the book. From a national security perspective, however, President Obama said he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. The president asked Comey, of course, former FBI director, to inform him if anything changes in the next few weeks that should affect how we share classified information with the incoming team. Comey said he would. Jamil, what does this tell you about the role that James Comey played in this? Is there a possibility that there's been information that James Comey has withheld from the Trump administration based off of directions Barack Obama gave him?
Well, look, it's certainly possible. I mean, we know that Jim Comey, when he left the FBI after he was fired, took with him materials, then leaked those to the press, with the explicit purpose of getting a special counsel appointed. So that's concerning in and of itself that the FBI director would do that and feel the need to do that. But even more troubling is this idea that information might have been withheld. Now, my guess is what they're talking about here is the Flynn investigation and the issues there. And obviously, as we know, Mike Flynn ultimately lied to the vice president, now has been indicted for that lie and for the lying to federal agents, I should say, lied to the FBI after the fact. And so that in and of itself is concerning. But the idea that you might withhold something from the entire administration team, the duly elected president of the United States, I mean, unless you think there's some sort of Manchurian candidate thing going on here, which there's no evidence of, that's a very troubling thing for them to put in writing and sort of document for the record.
Right, and to be fair, I think they do think there's a Manchurian candidate thing happening right now, but they have no evidence to think that, so their feelings, I don't think, are justified in this case. It's shocking to me, too, that they don't recognize how our executive branch is structured, that as the incoming chief executive, the president of the United States, he has the purview. The executive branch is under his management. The intelligence agencies are part of the executive branch. Every action that they take, every piece of information that they gather, every investigation is under the president's purview. He has a right to know what's happening, even if it relates to members of his own incoming team.
Yeah, actually, more importantly, he should know about things related to members of his incoming team so he can take action. Obviously, the president advised him about Mike Flynn, the outgoing president, and the president decided to take a different action. And look, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to withhold information from the president of his own team if you think there's a problem. If you think Mike Flynn or anybody else is compromised, you should be telling the president explicitly and giving him all the information he needs to make the right judgment. To do otherwise is to undermine our own national security.
Right, which may have been the point of some of these people in the outgoing administration to undermine the Trump presidency. Last thing, Jamil, that I want to ask you about. So FBI Director James Comey, Susan Rice said he was present in this room. She actually said the president spoke to him directly and said, let me know if anything changes. Comey agreed to let the president know if anything changed in regards to this information that they might possibly withhold from President Trump. James Comey, however, did not disclose his participation in this meeting to Congress when he was testifying under oath. In fact, he specifically didn't mention it. I'm not sure how you could overlook mentioning something as serious as this when he was testifying about the investigation into possible collusion between Trump and Russia. Do you believe the FBI director deliberately misled Congress about this?
It's hard to know whether he deliberately misled Congress, but I will note that when Jim Comey met with President Trump and he felt like he was being asked to do things that were outside the bounds or inappropriate, he wrote it down. And again, just like this CYA email to herself from Susan Rice, Jim Comey wrote himself a memo saying, here's what I think happened in this Oval Office meeting. Doesn't appear that he did the same thing with President Obama. And to the extent that he did, he hasn't taken that with him and disclosed that to the media. So that's concerning, too. And so you've got to wonder, there seem to be real problems here. And you got to wonder, why is this happening right now? Why are senior administration officials, why are senior officials of the FBI writing themselves, cover yourself notes, in the context of a serious ongoing investigation about national security matters related to foreign nation?
Right. And worth noting, I believe James Comey has said that he did not take memos about any meetings with Barack Obama, that he only had that kind of material about meetings that he's had with President Trump. So there's an inherent double standard there anyway. Jamil, we're about 25 seconds before we have to end this segment, but I want to ask you, from someone who's worked inside this intelligence community, what should happen here? Senators Grassley and Graham have asked Susan Rice, the author of this email, to explain the email in greater detail. But where should this investigation go? What should we do to hold accountable or investigate what this email was all about or what happened in this meeting?
Well, look, obviously there are concerns raised by the Strauss-Page text messages about the way they felt about the incoming president, concerns about things happening at the FBI. You've seen Bob Mueller fire those two people or remove them from his investigation. So clearly the House Intelligence Committee and now the Senate is looking at these issues and is deeply concerned. And so, Senators Graham and Grassley also released a memo or an email about the Carter Page investigation. That's an important thing for people to look at and figure out exactly what's going on. I think at the end of the day, the American people need all the information about what was going on in the prior administration and the current administration. And frankly, more transparency will allow the American people to make their own judgments about who's right and who's in the wrong here and what we need to do, if anything, to reform these agencies where there might have been problems. Having been on the inside of this process, I don't see massive conspiracies or massive collusion. That being said, if there are issues, we need to ferret them out and fix them.
Right, and I don't think anybody disagrees with you. I think there's just no evidence, no proof to substantiate the allegations made by Democrats against President Trump. But we do have fairly shady behavior from some Democrats from the prior administration. Jamil, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.